All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the stream. Just doing a few final checks. Looks like my microphone is doing good. Okay. Last time it kind of shorted out. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sean. I live and work in Shenzhen, China. I've been here for 10 years, 15 years in China overall. And I'm here to share my insights from working and living in China among the Chinese, working for top tech companies like Huawei, Vivo, etc. So a lot of the work I do is I work with Chinese companies going overseas. I advise Western companies coming into China. And as a China focused individual who's American, again, I love my country, but I am not the biggest fan of some of the ways that my country engages with China. And so my approach, as well as the approach of many people who bridge the gap between China and overseas markets, is we want to compete with China. I would love for my country to be competitive or even beat China, but uh, the way that it works is that China is such a rising force these days, whether it be tech, whether it be manufacturing, more and more soft power on the global stage, especially since the last year, the US has been withdrawing from many impactful organizations. So it's really about why the USA is potentially getting its China strategy very wrong and the potential negative impact this could have on many Americans and people around the world if their countries fall too far behind. So, again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Today we are live on Twitter/X as well as YouTube. Um, Again, any questions, drop them in the chat. And feel free to let me know if you think China is a threat or an opportunity. The current US stand, as I understand it as an American watching everything on the news, watching everything that is said by politicians, as well as President Trump, is that China is viewed mainly as a threat, whereas I would beg to differ. I think it's more of an opportunity. That being said, it is an opportunity that countries, companies, professionals, and individuals overseas, they have to choose. They have to choose to grasp that opportunity. If we simply wait, we do nothing to prepare, then China will outpace us even more. And they're already dead even with us in AI, and they're definitely ahead of us in drones. DJI, the Chinese drone manufacturer, is what, 70% of all global drones? Nobody's catching up with them anytime soon, even if they do a ban. And we'll get more into things like tariff bans later, though, of course, feel free to put a specific question in the chat if you have any. But the point being is that they've tried to ban Huawei, didn't work. They made their own chips. They're still making their own phones. We tried doing a tariff against them. We're hurting our own consumers, our own small businesses, a lot more than we're hurting China. And so, again, from someone who's been here, who takes more of an objective look at the news concerning China than you might say see in the USA, you can't block China. You can't stop China. They manufacture most of our goods anyways, so any attempt to stop that is going to shoot ourselves in the own foot. There's no way we can duplicate China's manufacturing capability in anything less than 5, 10, 15 years, even if we wanted to. Um, there's a reason why every single company offshored its manufacturing to China. Again, agree with it or don't agree with it. The fact is, we've done it. Yes, there's potential downsides if we have so much of our manufacturing concentrated in one country, though I would also argue that in addition to that risk, it also has had a number of benefits, not just for the US consumers, for small businesses. Goods are not only cheaper, but they are much more high quality. I mean, people like to delude themselves saying that, oh, Chinese goods are cheap. Well, there's certainly some cheap and maybe bad quality Chinese goods, but think of it this way. Who makes our iPhones? Who makes every single one of our iPhones? It's China. Who makes lots of our solar, new energy equipments, it's China. Who makes 50% of the world's and uses 50% of the world's robots, industrial robot arms? It's China. So China is high tech. They're break even with the USA. They're ahead of other countries. And if countries don't pivot, if they aren't moving in the right direction, they're going to be left behind. So let's get into it. Any questions, drop them in the chat. So while we're talking, if you feel your country is doing something good or something bad to work with China, let me know. First thing I think that we can really jump into is there's a shrinking pool of China-focused talent that understands China. And we talk about talent. It's not just students. It could be job seekers. It could be professionals. It could be executives. It could be government officials. That's what we mean when we say talent. So, and one of my points that I always come back to, whether it's here on the live stream, whether it is on talking on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on social media. Speaking of which, if you would like to have more insights or even have a discussion about China, you can make sure that you follow me on social media. So as you can see, I'm on YouTube, actually Instagram, at SeanYum_China. So feel free to follow if you would like. But in addition to that, let's go back to it. So I always say, I think people should view China as an opportunity, as a frenemy, basically a competitor, definitely a competitor, but not someone we have to hate. But all of my advice, it really doesn't matter. You can like China, you can hate China. The point is, either way, many countries, it could be USA, I'm talking as an American, so that's more of my area of expertise, but you could talk about Europe. If countries aren't competing effectively, then they're going to be throwing their advantages away. And so the key thing I want to start off with, I actually did a post on this on LinkedIn. So if you would like to check out my LinkedIn, I'll list it up later, but you can just search for my name, Sean Upton-McLaughlin, on LinkedIn. And I did a video, which I'll share shortly, where I talked about, there's less and less China-focused talent. So the key points are, yes, there's less Americans studying Mandarin or topics. I'm not sure if there's specific government pressure in that regard, but there's less incentive for universities to offer it, despite how important and influential China is and will be to our world. In addition to that, there's been less study abroad trips, less research exchanges with China post-COVID, again, due to geopolitics. And of course, there are less collaborative programs within universities, again, because of geopolitical pressure. But here's the thing. And one of China's really big advantages, I mean, it doesn't matter that they're not a democracy. It doesn't matter that they are a more controlling, authoritative state. They have their 5-year plans, and they have a common direction that they've been following, more or less, for the last 10, 15, 20 decades. Whereas, at least in the USA, I love our country. I am a supporter of our democratic system. But the point is, we flip-flop back and forth every 4 years. And China has been going the same direction. It's hard to compete with that unless you make some drastic changes. So the point is, we are shooting ourselves in the foot by not having people that actually understand China. China, they've been sending their officials, they've been sending their students, their businessmen, businesswomen to the USA, to Western countries to study how we do business, how we run our economies, everything. Whereas there has not been the same inflow of Westerners going over to China or even non-Western foreigners. They've been learning about us. We haven't been learning as much about them, and that's a weakness. If we don't have people that really understand China, not people like, for example, Ron Vara, who basically wrote a fake book about China and lied about his key source because he doesn't exist. And just plenty of other people who are naysayers. They like to say, oh, China is going to fall. I'm over 40 right now. I'm about 40, 42 right now. And for the last 20 years, you keep seeing every single year, there's some new book that comes out that says China is going to collapse this year. It's sounding a bit like a broken record. So unless, I don't know, unless a meteor falls on China, it's not going to collapse. And we have to figure out how we're going to deal with China. Again, like China or hate China, we're going to have to figure out how we can position ourselves. How do countries position themselves? How do companies position themselves? This is important because even if you quit the China market, which many are choosing to, Chinese companies, they're coming overseas. They're coming to your backyard. The USA previously blocked Huawei from competing, from having their phones there, probably because of the threat it posed to Apple and Samsung in the US market. But Chinese companies, they're coming overseas. And if they can make better quality products at cheaper prices, look at BYD. They make better quality EVs than the USA, than Tesla. If you don't agree, let me know in the chat. But they make better EVs. They're at a cheaper price. They can make them faster because of the incredible China speed advantage they have in their supply chain. I mean, that is significant. So again, governments, companies, professionals, especially if there's Chinese companies being more prevalent overseas, you have to be prepared to work for them. So everyone needs to be prepared. So let's take a look at the video. I shot this the other day, a day or two ago in Shenzhen, China, where I'm based right now. So where is that video? So give me 1 sec. I'll bring that up. All right, so let's open this up. All right, so we're gonna just put this on right now. All right. So take a look at this, and while you're watching, let me know what you think. All right, so yeah, that's a key issue, is that if we don't know what's going on, then there's not many choices that we have in terms of how we deal with China. So that's definitely a big issue. I think it's very serious. Again, like China, love China, hate China. We need to be able to understand them, and that is seriously being undermined right now. Now, one of the reasons that I decided to do this specific topic for the live stream today was the news that I heard earlier this month, July 2025, that we all know the Trump administration has been, slashing departments, firing people, but I heard that they actually fired a number of China specialists, people that understood China, they understood Chinese business, Chinese policy, and they also could speak Mandarin Chinese, which, I mean, we're at a point where we're in a dead heat with China on AI. We're under the impact of the tariffs right now, and our response is apparently to fire the people who know about this country the most. And this is something where I don't like to talk about politics too much. I mainly focus on business. But it is worth noting that the US political machine doesn't really seem to understand or act regarding China rationally. Why do I say this? I say this because a lot of the rhetoric we hear about China, it happens during campaigns in the USA. It will happen maybe if there's some event that wants to be distracted from, China comes up. And then we try and, after we yell at China, we say China's horrible, then we try and come back to the bargaining table. And this is something that Trump has done. President Trump, Donald Trump has done multiple times. Um, in the last, what's barely even been a half year since he came on board. And we've gone back and forth. Attack China, don't attack China. We keep extending the TikTok ban, or the reprieve, I should say, from the TikTok ban. So it's really kind of all over there. And again, you don't have to support the Chinese political system. I'm not saying I support it. What I am saying is that we keep going back and forth on every key thing regarding China, and China keeps going in the same direction. And that it doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel like it's going to work in the long term. At least from everything I've seen from my mostly more objective position over here, I just don't see how it's going to work, especially since, we've been doing this for the last 5, 10, 15 years. They tried to kill Huawei. They're gone. Now we have Chinese new energy companies. Um, we have Chinese EVs. I mean, they keep coming out with new tech, better than our tech, cheaper and better than our tech, and it just doesn't seem to work. So we also have, what happened more a few years ago is, in addition to firing talent a few years ago, they had the China Initiative in the USA, which was basically weaponizing against academia. Anyone who was from China in academia in the USA, anyone who was China focused. Let me drop this down quick. So let me know if you've seen, obviously if in the USA you've probably seen this, but if you've anywhere else in the world, Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, let me know if you've seen any anti-China trends in academia, business, policymaking locally in your country. But it was a very big issue in the USA, to the point where scientists were being driven off, or basically they were kind of creating reasons to be afraid of them, even though I don't think I ever heard any concrete evidence. Businessmen were being, targeted. Students were being targeted. I mean, unless you really believe there's some huge, conspiracy that spans Chinese government, business, students, private sector. Yeah, governments spying each other. Let's not pretend they don't. But I mean, the U.S. has so long, we have depended on immigration to help fuel. And again, innovation is good, Silicon Valley, and then of course we've had so much talent from China, from the AI side, biotech. Let me show you something. I've showed it before in a previous stream, but I think it's so good that I really want you guys to see it. So let me just find this quick. Where is it? But basically, more or less, hold on, there we go. So the short answer is that out of all the people currently doing AI research in China, according to this tracker, 1/3 comes from the USA, 1/3 comes from China, and 1/3 comes from all the other countries. So the USA is conducting this anti-China, no, I would say anti-immigration push, when at least for AI, 2/3 of our AI researchers come from outside the USA. It's hard to wrap one's head around that. So let's see if I can figure this out, how I put this up. So let's see, let's share this. And again, any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Right now we're on Twitter. I think you can ask questions there. And we're also on YouTube, so feel free to ask any questions you have. If not, you can always find me on social media afterwards and ask any questions. So let's go to, where is it? Screen? Nope, no, that's not where it is. Here we go. So So let's, here we go. So, so what you may not be able to see is what I've done is you can look at this later. I'll list the link in the chat if you want to take a look. But more or less, what this actually means is if you look at, you see all the China, the left bar is the China bachelor's degree universities, the middle ground is the master's, and then the final is the actual researchers. And so what you can see from this, you can see that if I click on here, I'm going to lean down and try and take a look, is we see that, where is it? Hold on. There we go. So again, I'm just going to try and figure out what this is. So we have 31% of the people in graduate university. We have 30%, 31% actually come from Chinese bachelor's degree universities. We have 32.82% come from U.S. bachelor's degree universities, and then we have the rest are coming from other countries. So basically, after the USA and China, in terms of people that are doing postgraduate research in AI on U.S. universities, we have we have 7.34 from other countries. Then we have 6.56% are from India. So really, it's mainly the largest contributing countries are, of course, the USA at 32%, and then China at 31 something percent. So if you decide to cut off just in this one area, not talking about engineering, biotech, we're talking about just AI. If you get rid of the Chinese people coming over for immigration or even for studying here, 30% of the US's AI research goes away like that. So what I will do is, if you're interested, I'm going to take this link. It's archived because I think they stopped it this year, but it's still very interesting if you want to learn about the AI talent flows in the USA. So let's put this on. So there it is. So I won't go into that anymore because I've talked on it on a previous stream. But yeah, I mean, what we were talking about was the whole China initiative. They've been going after cooperation between China and the USA, and that's not really helping us. If we go on to say another point, so what happens? I was talking before a little bit about it, but let's go back to it. What happens when the USA or another country, for example, is incapable, on the fundamental level, incapable of understanding what China is, what China wants, and how they will react to the different things that we do? I don't want to say too much about President Trump, but I do recall, it's probably a matter of public record, that, oh, China's going to fold, and then China doesn't. Oh, we're going to have this tariff rate, and no, we're going to change it again. And that must have been a gift, a godsend to the Chinese government, because they didn't have to do anything. They just waited for the U.S. government to change its mind. And of course, I talked before about Ron Vara, there's Gordon Chang, these people who write these books claiming they understand how China works, and they've been claiming the same thing for 10, 15, 20 years, and none of it's come true as far as I'm aware. And so it's a big issue. It's a very, very big issue because this isn't a game for little kids. This is the fate of the world is not the right phrase, because, again, I don't see China as the bad guy. I see China as a very strong-willed competitor to the USA, which will overtake us and make us insignificant and irrelevant if we do not work to stay on the same level. So that's my approach. But and again, I don't remember very many US politicians or State Department people coming over speaking that much Mandarin. I actually have an interesting story. Back when I was just graduating from university, and I already was studying Chinese, studying China, so my path was kind of set. But I remember I was going up to various booths for the US government at a career fair, and I believe I went up to one of them. I'd gone up to the State Department, and I said, "Oh, well, I studied China. I want to work in China. I'd love to help my government. What can we do?" And they said, and basically, it's, "Oh, well, you could apply, but you have to take an exam. It's only every 2 years." And so, being a more fast-paced person, I said, "Okay, well, no, I'll go into the private sector and work on that side." There's one time I went to the Peace Corps. I said, "Hey, I want to volunteer in China." And they say, "Oh, well, no, we don't care about people who speak Chinese and understand China. If you can teach English professionally, we'll send you to China. Otherwise, we're sending you somewhere else." So there never really was this incentive to, or it doesn't feel like, I should say, it doesn't feel like that uh, that the USA or even international organizations are really taking China seriously. And it's going to bite us in the butt if it hasn't already. And again, anyone who's in the USA probably understands that China mainly comes up during the campaign season, mainly comes up during sensitive times or just when China is in the news. But we don't take a long-term approach to China. We take a very short-term approach. It's about how do we score points during the campaign. It's about how do we get short-term wins. It's not about how do we have an effective strategy to compete with them over the long term. So let's talk about a few things that are very obvious if you're here on the ground in China. So, for example, infrastructure is a key issue for me because, I mean, many people think of China, they say, "Oh, it's probably just some," well, Vice President J.D. Vance called all Chinese people peasants. And I think he must have either been more spectacularly ignorant than most people, but a lot of people in America do think that China is run down or that China is, oh, it's villages. I mean, China is one of the most high-tech countries in the world. And yes, you can't say that all the first-tier cities are the same as the lower-tier cities. There are, I mean, in just 50, 60 years, they've completely bootstrapped their economy and come to the same level, if not better, than the USA in many areas. And you can't do it all at once. And so, one of the things that people talk about is that, yeah, there's still people living, in poverty or poverty-like conditions. But again, the last 10, 20 years, the government here has lifted 400 million people out of extreme poverty. And so there's making these massive efforts, whether it comes to, say, building up the entire manufacturing ecosystem throughout China, which again is partly where China speed comes from. It's one reason they can make things so cheaply, so quickly, so high quality, and at scale. So that's very important. The China high-speed rail network. I'm from California. I was we had the BART line, which was very badly managed. It was all this political maneuvering. It could never get finished. And then in China, within 20 years? Within 20 years, I think they've built 12,000 kilometers of line at least. I might be wrong about the number, but it's a huge number all around China, to the point where nobody needs to fly anymore, because you can literally go from you could go from Beijing to Shanghai in about 5 hours on the train, though they've just gone from a 300 kilometers to they've just unveiled they're going to have a 600 kilometer per hour line, which will get you there in half the time. So that's 2.5 hours. They've put the time in. They've made the investments. America's infrastructure. I won't comment on Europe or other countries because I'm not very as knowledgeable in that area, but definitely America's infrastructure is crumbling. It was made decades ago, and China has been making a concerted push to build up this infrastructure. So, and then of course, the government has been pushing to support R&D development in high-tech sectors, AI, etc. So they're pushing the country in the same direction, and that's not something the USA is doing. Um, so, so key question for me, which you can consider and ask during the stream or afterwards, is it too late to catch up? Because a lot of people overseas, if they haven't been in China, if they haven't looked in China, I'm sorry, if they haven't been in China, lived in China, traveled to China, it's very hard. You may think I'm crazy. Like, what do you mean we can't catch up to China? What do you mean China's ahead? But it it might be. It's definitely ahead of many countries in AI. The USA still has OpenAI in other countries, so they're still doing okay for now. Though DeepSeek and other Chinese companies like Manus might be looking to catch up very quickly. The point is, they're a lot further ahead than many people realize. And hearing someone in the news say, oh, they're farther ahead or they're farther ahead in AI, it's very different than actually being here on the ground, seeing the speed with Chinese companies operate. It's pretty amazing. So let's go back to some of the points I wanted to cover. And again, I've talked about this a little before in previous streams, but it's good to go back to in that what's the real world business impact is in terms of missing out is that if we here's a good one. There's one when I was working with a Chinese company a year or two ago. There was a partnership that they had entered into with the Chinese or with a overseas, I think it was an American organization, and they just kept dropping the ball. They wouldn't respond to even emails. They kept doing the wrong things. They weren't holding up their end of the contract, and it just moving too slowly. And so I would say that's just basic business sense. But if you don't understand how to work with Chinese companies or how to work with Chinese organizations, you're going to miss out on those potential partnerships. And it's not how it was maybe 20 years ago, where China wanted to work with Western companies so they could learn from them. And some might say to take some of their tech, though, again, a lot of the organizations, the joint ventures that were set up in China between Chinese companies and Western companies were to share technology. And both sides went into that in agreement that that was what they were going to do. But now that China is the one that might be developing the best technology, so whether or not the Western companies will want to have a joint venture so they can get the Chinese technology, I'm not sure. But the point is, if you're interested in the idea of working with Chinese companies or how to work with Chinese companies, I'll be doing another stream tomorrow night on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter/X on some of the lessons I've learned working inside Chinese companies. So that'll be another topic that you, if you're interested in that, feel free to tune into that one. But the point is that there's so many opportunities, that there's so many Chinese companies, they want to go abroad. There's lots of money they can put out to work with companies. But if a certain country doesn't understand China, their businesses don't understand China, then the opportunities, they might go to Chinese agencies, Chinese service providers. They might go to, say, Europe or to Asian agencies and service providers. If, say, my country, for example, the USA, is unable to provide that level of expertise because the culture is different. Languages are different, yes, but culture is different. How organizational behavior is different. And if we do not have companies and professionals with that deep knowledge, then we're going to lose out. That's the key point. So again, I see a few more people are in the chat. Welcome. I'm Sean. I'm in Shenzhen, China. I've worked and lived here in Shenzhen for 10 years, China for 15 years. We're talking about, let's go back to the design. We're talking today about, again, we're talking about, is the USA and potentially other countries sabotaging their China strategy? And you may ask, what is a good China strategy? In short, I think the key thing is that it has to be competitive, but cooperative. Those are two key things, because China has so many advantages now, especially in infrastructure, in development, in manufacturing. And as we're seeing with some of the effects of the U.S. tariffs, is that the USA, at least, is coming to the understanding that we actually can't make things. They wanted to make the iPhones in the USA. Oh, well, it's going to cost twice as much. We want to take all the manufacturing back to the USA. It'll take 10 to 15 years to actually get it done, even if companies start that process right now. So it's not that simple. Back down. Yes, see, let's talk about U.S. brands losing ground in China. So this is something where it's a little bit more hazy. It's not as clear. I won't claim to know every single thing about why every single Western company leaves China or doesn't leave China. But we do know that the Chinese market is very competitive now. It's not the same way it was 20, 30 years ago, where Coca-Cola could come in as a very well-known Western brand and everybody would just buy it. Well, Coca-Cola may not be the best example because they're still doing okay, but this happened with a lot of Western brands where, it's a Western brand, people will just buy it. And that is becoming less and less the case. The iPhone only has a very small overall usership compared to what it used to be. Chinese phones are largely preferred by Chinese phone buyers, and this is likely the case for a number of other industries. Luxury, I believe, is one of the industries this is not the case for. So there are some industries that still have an overall level of support, but the key thing is, at least that I would like to point out, is that the Chinese market is hyper competitive, and this is something that happens when there are not that many resources to go around, which has happened in China. Things like there haven't been enough spaces in university for everyone, so everybody's been very competitive for it. Same thing with jobs, especially when there were a small number of Western companies. Everybody was fighting to get the best job opportunities. And this is something that happens when you have so many people in the country and when it's developing very fast. It's simply a byproduct of that. But the point is that you have this behavior that resulted from historical reasons I just mentioned. And the Chinese economy has developed, the Chinese companies and their tech companies' capabilities have developed to the point where now they're very fast, they're very competitive, and now their products, whether it be phones, whether it be other things, can match the quality easily of Western competitive or the Western variants, we'll say. And yeah, maybe there's a little bit of nationalism involved, but really it's who is moving the fastest, who is getting the customer's attention the best. Maybe Western companies in the U.S., for example, are at a disadvantage because they don't have the people who understand China, because it's not simply a matter of, let's go hire some Chinese people, put them in China, they'll take care of it because they know China. It's not always that simple. Why? Well, partly because one of the reasons that China Speed works for China is that their HQs are working at the same speed as maybe their overseas subsidiaries, especially if they send a good amount of Chinese managers there. But there might be lag time if the Chinese local team wants to do something this way. Maybe the HQ says, "Oh no, that doesn't make sense." I mean, actually, I remember one time when I was at a Western agency working, and we went to do a pitch for a overseas one of the big retail stores, Western retail stores, chains in China. And we went in, there's a room of all the local Chinese workers, and then one of the big Western GM. And I said, here are all these new retail trends in China. This is how the Chinese are shopping. And he just kind of looked us dead in the face and said, that's not how we do things at our company. Now, whether or not they change in the long run, I'm not sure. But the point is that it doesn't matter if you have the local Chinese team on the ground in China. If the Western HQ doesn't have the knowledge, the insight, the right instincts, the patience to support them, then you're still going to fall behind. You still won't be able to keep up with the local Chinese companies. And of course, we talked earlier about EVs. It's not just the Chinese market. If they're coming overseas, if they're coming to Europe, USA, they can still move faster. They can still outcompete you in your home market unless, as we've seen in Europe and the USA, they put EV tariffs in place. So, as I've been saying, hinting at, there are better options. There are different ways we can go about this. It's not simply let's try and ban everything from China or put a tariff on everything from China, because obviously it's not going to work. There's too much interconnectedness between the two countries that unless we just want to just, in the USA, for example, raise prices 3, 4, 5 times for US consumers, depending on what tariff rate Donald Trump wants to do tomorrow. Whether we want to put a number of small businesses just out of business because they've been able to build their businesses on cheap and quality, reliable goods from China. So if anyone is from these countries, because I'm going to list a few options I found online, tell me if I'm wrong. But I believe that, Singapore, I think, is one example, because even though their native, or their official language, I should say, is English, they have a more multilingual regional talent approach. That's what I've heard. If anyone is on the stream from Singapore, if you know any more, feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Of course, we have, I believe Germany has more of an emphasis on trade diplomacy and engineering partnerships, as opposed to the USA, which just decides to ban collaboration in academia and other things. It's rather depressing being an American, seeing everything happen like that. But again, if you, let me drop this in here. So yeah, if you know anything that you in your own country that's happening to help your country and your professionals, your companies work better with China, feel free to let me know in the comments. But there are better ways. There are better ways. If countries really want to, there are ways to compete and cooperate with China. Because, as I said at the beginning of the stream, China is not going anywhere. They are here. They have the infrastructure. They have the expertise. They have the talent. They have the support of the government. The companies do. So take that as you will. All countries, specifically Western countries, the USA, have to decide how they're going to approach this. So, just to review a few points, what would a smart China strategy look like from the USA? A few points from me as an American. Again, feel free to chime in the comments if you'd like. So, I would prefer to have the USA investing a lot more in China-fluent human capital. Again, the video I showed earlier, actually, since we have a few more people, I will share that again, just so you can see it. But again, before I do that, let me just share this quick. If you are a professional and you would like to follow me on LinkedIn, you can search me by my name, Sean Upton-McLaughlin. Again, all my channels, I'm very transparent. This is my name. This is who I am. You can scan the QR code, or you can just type Sean Upton-McLaughlin in LinkedIn. And I've shared this video I'm going to share again on LinkedIn. And again, welcome to more people. We were talking about what's the right strategy for the USA and other countries to compete and collaborate with China at the same time. So again, I did a longer post on this on LinkedIn, but I will just play the video now for all of you. Again, I played it earlier, but it's been 45 minutes, so some of you may not have seen it. All right, so again, this video is here in Shenzhen, China, where I live and work. So take a look. All right. So I just think that's a really good point, not just because I'm talking, but there. Back to the normal stream. So, I mean, really what it comes down to is, I mean, the way it used to always work 20 years ago is just you send the expats over and they just deal with things and they try and get things done. They often don't understand it fully. So it can be a big mess. And then, of course, the last few years, we've had more people just trying to completely localize. The problem is that when it comes to running a business, running a project between China and other countries, it's really a two-way conversation. It's not simply, oh, local team handle it, or you tell your assistant to go, oh, tell the Chinese boss this is what I want to do. But there is much more vague, much non-direct communication in China. So you might tell your assistant to tell the other company, maybe tell the manager who tells their manager who tells the boss this, but then maybe there's a little bit more softening of the meaning. Maybe they don't want to translate it as directly, and then you don't know what exactly the Chinese boss heard. And when your assistant tells you, oh, this is what they said, you don't know if that really is 100% of what they said, if there's anything you're missing. So it's really about how do we ensure there's clear two-way communication, collaboration. Because if you go over there as an expat to China and you don't understand China, and if you don't understand the culture, it's very hard to understand what's going on. One of the issues that I'll say is that I very much support journalism, but there have been a number of journalists who have gone to China, and we need more journalists in China reporting on China. I will say that. But if many who did not really understand Chinese or Chinese culture, and that I think takes away from some of the reporting. The same thing with businesses, with academics. If you don't understand China, the Chinese culture, Chinese, it's hard for you to do your job as effectively, especially since the power dynamics are different. Before, the Western companies had the brands had more power, the expats had more power. But as Chinese people get more wealthy, their companies can compete on an even footing in China or overseas with Western and overseas companies. To me, it seems like even if we view China not as an enemy but as a competitor, I would prefer, if I had a company and I had to send someone over there, I would prefer they could understand what was happening in China for themselves without any outside help. But that's my opinion. So, um, yeah. And there might be a number of potential sectors that we could collaborate in. I mean, that's for different specific sectors and companies to decide. Obviously, China has big advantages in new energy, climate areas, AI, healthcare potentially. And so it's not simply that they want our technology. No, they have the technology, they have the know-how, they have the manufacturing, and we could, as America, as Western countries, as other countries, we could benefit from that if we find ways to collaborate with China. And of course, the more people we have from our own countries that go over to collaborate with the Chinese, whether or not the Chinese understand our languages, that it's easier to collaborate. So I think, again, if you have any questions, let me know. If not, I will keep talking. If you are, all right, so I think to close this out, I will say that um, we are all individuals, unless the president of some country is watching, but we're individuals. And so we can't really control directly what our country does, what our companies do, but we can think more about how we prepare ourselves for what I would say the inevitable rise of China, um, so that at least we can come off better and okay. So does this mean that everyone needs to go out and learn Chinese immediately? No. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see that we talk about this a lot. Is that Chinese is great, but Chinese language skills without understanding the culture, how Chinese organizations work, how Chinese policymakers think. The Chinese language can't do much if you don't understand the rest as well too. So, reading, research, maybe come over to China if you're able to. Talk to the locals. Don't just talk to the professionals who speak the language, but try and actually talk to real Chinese people, see what their views are. And this is completely safe. I mean, Chinese are extremely welcoming, even to Americans, with everything the American government is doing to try and counter China. They're very welcoming. I, as an American, have never felt in danger here, always very welcoming. So there's no problem there. But definitely, if you're a professional, you work in business and government policy, academia, whatnot, you definitely should be thinking is that what's happening with your own country's China strategy, by not necessarily shifting directly to China, but maybe having China interest, maybe some China adjacent capabilities, you might be able to take it, especially if you're a younger professional, you might be able to take advantage of that. If you're someone who could help bridge the gap for people in your own country, that's certainly a big advantage. And then, of course, if you have certain technical skills, you might be able to get jobs in China as well too. And that's another thing I think is useful to consider is that if China continues to rise, which I'm assuming, I'm betting that it will, then more companies will be wanting to come overseas, which means they need more assistance from overseas talent, whether in an overseas country or in China. And by making sure that you have not just the technical skills, the business skills, but the cultural skills, then that's something you can take advantage of too. But again, any questions before we close this out in a few minutes? Feel free to drop it in the chat. But again, you can also follow me, Sean _China on YouTube, X, Instagram, YouTube. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Just search my name or scan the QR code. I'll be trying to do these streams at least once every week, though I may have some random ones that come up. There's one coming up same time, so an hour ago your time right now. It'll be tomorrow night my time. It'll be tomorrow afternoon Europe, tomorrow morning US time. And we'll be talking about kind of some of the lessons I've learned over 15 years of working inside Chinese companies, and that will be more business focused. But if you're interested, please feel free to join. Or again, if you want to follow me on YouTube or LinkedIn, the events, the streams will be saved there. YouTube is probably the easiest. So again, any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll be closing out in a few minutes. But I'll just go through some of the key points again. China's rising. No matter what you hear in government and people who've written books without really ever knowing anything about China, China's rising. It's not going to collapse. Huawei's not going to collapse. Chinese companies are not going to fail. The USA already tried to kill them, and they're still coming. And they're innovating. I mean, even Jensen Huang of NVIDIA definitely supports Huawei. And again, even if it's not, say, the specific market, but again, I'll just give the reminder that at least the USA specifically is actually, if you look, again, check out the chat if you want to go on YouTube, because the chat will be there where I listed the Marco Polo AI Talent Tracker 2.0. And that will really show that for the USA, 1/3 of their AI researchers come from the USA, 1/3 come from China, 1/3 come from other parts of the world. I looked at Europe. I'm not going to do it right now, but you can look at it for yourself. But in terms of who comes from a bachelor's degree university, Europe is relatively self-contained, like 80%, I think, self-contained in terms of AI research, whereas the USA depends for 60% of its AI researchers from non-US countries, which is, it feels insane to me because I thought only like 15% of Silicon Valley workers were from China, but apparently AI researchers is much higher. So again, don't underestimate China, whether you be a country, company, or a professional, because they are coming. They're taking longer in some areas. They do have more trouble when it comes to brand, when it comes to when it comes to understanding how to communicate with overseas consumers, but they already make better products than we do. They make them faster, they make them cheaper. So make sure you think about this, how to compete and cooperate effectively with China, whether you're a country, a company, or a professional. Though obviously, my main talk today was focused more on the USA, which I feel is completely botching its strategy to China. So um, on that note, I appreciate all of you who joined the stream and who are still watching. I hope you've enjoyed this hour-long chat on how we should be positioning ourselves against China. Again, if you have any questions further, you can follow me on any of my social media channels. I'm always happy to answer DMs so long as they're done in a friendly and respectful manner. So that being said, been great being with you guys tonight. I will be again coming back every Wednesday, I think, for the foreseeable future for different topics on China, especially if there's something interesting in the news. So if you want to learn more about China, please follow me on YouTube, X, Instagram. We don't care. I just listed it there. But YouTube, X, and LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about China and make sure you are positioned properly as a professional or as an individual for the rise of China, which is happening, has happened, and is still coming. So thanks again for joining, and I will see you guys next time.